Hello, hi. So today we are going to continue on Compose, and today's subject is going to be creating a dynamic list. So basically, a list that we display, and then we can add something to it. And so let's just get started here. Let's call it maybe dynamic list. So it's just going to be, or let's call it actually groceries list. So basically you can notice here that I selected empty compose activity, and this is going to be just a groceries list. So you can imagine you have milk, water, and then you can add more like sugar, apple. We'll see what UI we are shooting for here. So yeah, that's pretty much, so a pretty simple example of how to build a list that to add dynamic values to it with Compose. Okay, so we have here some setup for just a greeting text, so we can just remove this since we don't need it. Similar thing for this. We can remove this as well, and then we can just rely here, create our new screen. Let's call it grocery screen. And so we need a new file, of course, to have this new screen. We can add it here, but I just prefer like each UI to have its own separate screen, so or file. So we could have here grocery screen, and this one, of course, needs to be. I'll just wait for this to sync a little bit. And the structure we will be aiming for is something like an input field, right? So input field for adding an item, and then a button to add an item, right? And then under that we could just have a list of groceries. So it's just going to be a normal list, right? Okay, so that's what we are aiming for. So let's create our grocery screen. And let's create a composable function for that. So this is going to be just a groceries screen. And let's just bring this up so that we can fill up our composables. So since we want to display those like one after the other, so it's a sort of column, so we will need to have a column here. And we of course want to fill the entire width, so we are going to do fill max width. And we imported modifier needs to be in the parameters here. And now we want to add our field and then our button, right? So to do that, we need a text field for our button. To set a value and to be able to update it, we need, of course, to define the state for that. And so we would have a text state. We are doing var here to be able to assign it. And we could just use by remember. And this is going to be, since the text is going to be just a string that you input, we could just have a mutable state of a string. So here this is the default value, and then we could update it when we need to. However, for this by to work, we'll need to do just import some specific things. This is a property target, so we'll need to import Android X dot compose runtime get value, and we'll need to import set value. So the getter and setter. And now this is working. To set the value, it's just text state, and this will just, this is equivalent to text state dot value, right? It will call a getter that returns us that, and then here when the value updates, we want to set it, and so we can just do it. And that's pretty much it for the text field. We want a button after that, and so let's add our button. We'll define our click listener later. We need a text. And here, let's just say add new item, right? And let's, of course, just move this into a string resource. So add item as the resource name. And that should be it for the item field and the button. Now we want a list. With Compose, the equivalent of recycler view are two things. One is lazy column, and the other is lazy row. So lazy column is going to be a vertical list. So you could imagine a recycler view with a vertical linear layout manager. And then for a horizontal list, that will be lazy row. In our case here, we want to show them like in something like this. So water, milk, carrots, or something like that. So we want them in a vertical order. So we will use a lazy column here. And then the way it works is we need to specify here in the, we can use items here, right, to specify first how many items we have, right, the count, and then in this lambda we can specify what the single item looks like. The other available thing is item if you want to just have one item. So if you want to just have, let's say, a text field, maybe call this header. So this will just display header as the row. If we want multiple, let me actually just show this in a preview of what we have so far. So if we do preview, what I like to do here is to say show system UI, so I can see it in a phone format, right? That will be easier to work with. Okay, so you can see we have a field, we have the button, and then we have the first item. Just to show you how the lazy column works here, let's say we have 4 items, right? And let's just put maybe the item is going to be just a text, and here we get the index as a parameter here, and so we could use that. So let's just call this index, and here we could just item number index, right? And then let's see what this will look like. So you can see we have item 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, starting from 0, right? And then we have the header. So this is kind of the structure of what we'll use. Of course, we'll need to add the items that are in the field here. What I like to do though is, just to make this cleaner, is separate these two into each composable function. So the input and the button, one composable function, and the list into another composable function. To do that, we can extract this, or actually just move it, create a composable function here. Let's call it grocery input, right? And then call that here so that we display it first. This should still work the same way. And it does. The next thing is to move this into grocery list. So you can see here the paths look really neat and clear. You can easily see if you want to go to the input, you can go here. If you want to go to the list, you can go here, right? And here we could have a composable. Let's call this a grocery list. And we still have the same content. Now let's clean this up a little bit more. So what we want is, ideally we want some padding, right? At least a 60 DP padding just to make these nicer. So to do that, we can just go here and make it on the entire screen. And so this padding, we would want it vertically to be 16 dp, just like the usual, and here 16 dp horizontally. Okay, and this should make this a little bit nicer. Okay, the other thing, we want some spacing between these columns, right? And so one way we could do that is to say arrangement, I believe, vertical arrangement dot spaced by, I think, arrangement spaced by, let's give them 16 dp. Okay, now they are nicely separated. The next thing we want is to center the button. Usually it's centered. This doesn't look very nice, so let's center the button here. So to do that, we need to we can use something called just horizontal alignment, and so we will need a modifier here, which will need us to have the button be in a column. So we can just move this up here, and now we should be able in our modifier to set the align to be alignment equal to center horizontally. And then for our column, we wanted to fill width, right? So it's going to be fill. So the parent fills the entire width, and the button is centered. And usually on click is the second parameter, or the last parameter. Oh, sorry, the on text here needs to be inside this. And so to do that, yeah, this should be better. One thing is we want the text field to also fill max width, and we want to give it a label as well, just a hint in the text field. And so to do that, we can just do a label and then set a text composable. This is really nice, by the way. It's not a special API, it's just provide the composable for the label. And so this is going to be maybe just new item, or right, and we can extract this as a string as well. All right, and if we take a look, let's just make this be nicer like that, and this should be better. Okay, so now we have a grocery input that has the text field and the button, and then we have a list that has the items. Now what we want is to populate the list with actually the items, with some default items, but also with whatever we add to the through the input field. And so let's do that here. Let's make like maybe, so to be able to update the list through the field, the list needs to have a state. That's how Compose works, is we declare how our UI gets populated, and we define it. That's where declarative UI comes from, and then the composable will take care of updating itself whenever that state is updated. So we need some grocery state that is kind of a state of a list of elements, right? And whenever you add an item, We want to add that item to that list. And so what this would mean here is that we will need a grocery state here, and this is going to be, of course, by remember, similar to what we had with the field. And then here, what do we want? We want it to be a list of elements, and it's enough for it to be a list of string at the moment. And so we could just say mutable state of, and pass in a list of elements here. Let's just initialize it with a couple of grocery items, so milk maybe and water, just as a start. And then what this would mean is that's what we want to use here. Whatever is in the state, that's what we want to populate the composable with. So what we want to pass here is a list of items, the size, and so because that's the count of elements, so grocery state size. The other thing here is we want this to be the name of the element, right? And so that's just going to be grocery state index, and this is going to be the text. We'll update this later, but let's see just what this will look like. Let's maybe modify this to just val for now. Okay, let's start interactive mode so that it updates. Okay, so now that we have those items, when you add something here in the field, we want to, and click the button, we want to add that to the list. So how can we do that? So basically what we need is we need this to be updated when the button is clicked. So first thing we need is we need to have some listener here, so on grocery item added, right? And that will give us a string, and then we'll do something, and that's what we are going to call in when onClick is called. So we'll pass. So what should we pass here? We want to pass whatever was inputted in the text field, and we have the text state, so we could just pass that. That would be whatever is in the input field. And then after that, we need to update this state, and we need to update the state here. So update groceries state with the added item, list with the added item, right? And so what this would mean basically is that we need this state to be outside of this composable. We need it to be in the parent so that we can manipulate it and add an element to it. And so we could just move it over here, and all we need to pass to it is the value. And so here, let's call it groceries, which is a list of string, and we can read that here, right? The other thing is we can update. Now here, we could just take our grocery state and then just update it to have this new element, which is item. And now, because this is immutable, we need to make it a var so that it can be reassigned. And whenever this state is updated, grocery list will recompose and will display the list again with the new added item. And so here we need this. Let's run this again, just make sure that our list still works. Okay, cool. So now that we have the list, and when you click on the button you add, let's just test that this behavior works correctly now. So let's run the app. Okay, so we have the list here, we have the input field, and then we have the two default elements that we have initially. And so here we can add more things, right? So let's see. If I add this new item, it's added to the end of the list. I can try to add more, maybe apple, right? We have one small thing here, is that the fields still contains the element after we add it, so making it a bit harder to add a new element. So we can clear the input field when the element is added. And so to do that, it's pretty simple, since in the button on click listener we have access to the text field. So to just do equal to empty. So let's run this again, just make sure it works. And let's try one more time. That works. Let's add something else. It still works. Okay. So the main idea here, you can notice, is that we used lazy column. You could pass items, just pass the length of the element, and then you will get index in the item content composable lambda here, and then you could use that to grab the element at that index from the list in your state, in your item state, and then display that. And then if you take a look here, by hosting the state and just moving it up, when the button is clicked, we can update it and add a new item. And then in the grocery input field, composable here, we have the text field and the button. And because we have access to the text state, we can also clear it. And also, I think this is an example of using something else other than just a string for your state. So we are using just a list here that we update, and our lazy column just updates as we update that state. Yeah, so this was a pretty simple example of how to create a dynamic list. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next one. Bye.